So
Everything.
how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm back in Atlanta, so for
Oh, okay.
for well, 8 more days, I think, and then I'm moving to Texas. I started this series because the other aspect of me discovering radical feminism is me reconnecting with my spirituality, very, very linked to my womb. And I loved when we met for the first time in person, and went to South Carolina. you you heard what I said about my concern about this being sort of a almost dark spiritual warfare at work here. And I get a little nervous sometimes to speak on that kind of stuff, and you were very receptive to it. So when I started doing this series, I wanted to chat with you about it and about your connection to spirituality, and how that's linked to your feminism. Because you consider yourself a feminist, right?
Yeah, yeah, I
Right?
do. I haven't been I have not been turned away from that language because um, I think it's ours, and I think just like the word woman, and all of our other language, we need to reclaim it. And I don't think you have to be any particular way necessarily to be a feminist. The first time I was actually called a feminist was in like a negative light by a male friend in college, and I hadn't even thought about it. But then after he did that, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm a fucking feminist, and you can kiss my ass
What was the
because
context
I care
that
about women and what we need. And if that makes me a feminist, then yeah.
was it like at a party, like some kind of like heated debate, or what was the context of the
No, it was just I didn't really I'm not the partying type. So it was just among friends. Like we were just in one of our friends' apartments. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but he's just typical guy, like, entitled, well off, from Ohio or wherever he's from. Um and just flung it at me as some kind of insult, and I just was kind of taken aback, like, why would you say that as if it's a negative thing? Like, I think I was even just talking about obviously something concerning women. It wasn't like man hating or anything like that, as far as I know. uh but so yeah, so it was a little strange. And um thinking back about it, though, I mean, I've always been a feminist. Like, I was raised with my single mother, and we always went to women's spaces together. Like, a big part of our upbringing was La Leche League meetings, where we met, these families, which were mostly women and their children. And there were, the fathers were around, but I don't even really remember them. I mostly remember the children and the
what
women.
was the name of the meeting again?
La Leche League,
What's
so the
that?
milk league. Um, so La Leche League, it was an organization formed to help mothers with breastfeeding,
Oh,
to help
okay.
get the numbers up for that and make sure we have healthy generations of children after they started pushing formula, and it was harming babies. And women need support. We were disconnected from our communities. And so when you don't have that connection, when you don't see other women nursing their babies, we're told that, of course, it is a natural thing, normal function of the body, but it also comes with its challenges. And so if you're not seeing it in community, if you're not being brought up seeing other children nursing, you don't know what's normal, you don't know the struggles, you don't know how to latch a baby properly. They have to learn, you have to learn. So this was formed, and they had lactation consultants, and they would meet, and it would be women who have all breastfed their babies, so they know the challenges, and they'd get together and basically raise their children together. It's a beautiful community of women.
That sounds
So that's what I
beautiful.
was brought up with, and a lot of them we still are in touch, like, and even some of them I like serendipitously came back into contact with in college. There was a woman who had been part of it in Virginia, and then when I was in college in Baltimore, Maryland, she ended up it ended up that she was living there and basically doing the same kind of work that I was doing, that I was going into, because she was an older woman. And so we ended up working together during my master's program and creating an arts center in a part of Baltimore City.
You got your master's in like fine arts, visual arts?
I got my BFA in general fine arts, and then I got an MA in community arts, which was at the time a very new program. I think it was in its second year. And it was everything I wanted to do. I had done some community art partnership is what they called it, where you'd go out into the communities around the city, different places like libraries or schools or after school programs, in various places, and you'd work with the kids and teach art and learn to do like lesson planning and things like that. And so from there, once they got this master's program, I was like, oh, I have to go into that, because this stuff just changed my life. Like, I never saw myself, my mom was a teacher, but I never saw myself as a teacher. Like, I never thought I could do it. Like, I never thought I'd be able to teach anybody anything. I was like very introverted, very shy, didn't really talk to too many people. But this I was able to do this work. Like, I was able to connect with the children. Like, I understood different personalities, because my personality was so often misunderstood growing up. Like, teachers, I had some that even straight up acted like I had some kind of mental mental issues because I didn't talk to them, but I just didn't have anything to say to them, really was the case. So I think that helped me kind of uh, become more in touch with other people's personalities and how varied they can be, because I got the outgoing people, I understood that, and they were easy to reach and talk to. And then I got the really quiet kids, and I could talk to them because I knew what made them comfortable. Like, you don't go to a quiet kid and say, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to bite you. Like, I'm not a freaking idiot, I know you're not going to bite me. Like, I can't tell you how many times I got that nonsense. So I was able to get really comfortable in this kind of setting. And so when they got the master's program, it was, I guess, a year before I graduated was the first year. So then I went into the second year of the program, and it was everything that I wanted to do. It wasn't teaching necessarily in schools. It was under the arts education umbrella. So we learned all the aspects of teaching. We learned curriculum writing and lesson planning and all that, but we also learned community community organization, social change, like, all the stuff that we should be seeing that they talk about, but it's totally back asswards now. That's what we learned. And we didn't just learn the theory, we also did the practice, right? So we went into communities and actually did the work, which, makes all the difference, because you can read all the theory and then not really understand how to put it into practice. So we got to do both of those things, and it was life-changing. I learned so much. I learned a lot about myself. I found my voice. Yeah, and it was all the things. Like, that's why I'm so disappointed with what I'm seeing today, because
Education specifically.
well, what we're seeing today, just in society in general, like, there was this brief moment in time where I thought we were going to start having these conversations, because in my work, I learned that that's very important. You have to know how to have the conversations and actually see people and meet them where they're at. Even if you don't agree on everything, you have to know how to work with various ideologies and things like that. And part of that, and part of creating actual social change, positive social change, is having conversations. So there was a brief moment in time, right before, like, the pandemic stuff and all that, where I thought we were going to start having conversations. But then I realized people weren't having conversations. They were shutting down conversations. They were saying, if you don't think this way, then you are canceled. If you don't come over to our way of thinking, then that's it. If you don't do this exactly right, you're done. So we weren't actually having the conversations we needed. It was tyrannical.
So you even had this hope during the Trump years. It wasn't like you still had a hope that these conversations were going to happen.
This was like right before the pandemic. So, when
Right.
Trump was there and stuff, and I mean that was really hard to deal with, like him getting in office and all of that. But I think that's different to what we were then starting to see socially. Like it seemed like it was bubbling, like the uprisings, the protests and things. These were good because these had the potential to be a catalyst for the conversations that we needed to have, but it went totally just awry. And you have these ideas that are in academia coming out to the general population and being twisted and misunderstood. And that's where you got the people canceling, because they're saying, oh, well, you're supposed to believe this academic whatever terminology, and if you don't do it right, to people who have no idea, people have not read about this stuff, they are not educated in this stuff, so of course they're not going to have any idea of how to interpret this language or whatever. So they're interpreting it in ways that just didn't make not is not what it is. Like you go and you tell somebody, look, your cancel culture is not okay. Oh, it's not cancel culture, it's holding people accountable. No, you're literally canceling people. You are shaming people. You are weaponizing people's children. This is what I saw in my community. These were communities of women in birth. So you'd think women in birth should know how to care for each other. That's what we were there for. But they were weaponizing other people's children against them, saying, look, you have these black, brown children or whatever. Why are you supporting, this white supremacist ideology or whatever it was,
Mhm.
I'm sure you can imagine everybody's seen it all over social media.
Yeah.
So it wasn't having conversations. It wasn't this exchange of ideas and our experiences and what it feels like to be in my skin or your skin. It wasn't any kind of understanding of each other. It was just, you think my way and that's it. So it was a very, very brief moment right before or like right into the pandemic time that I thought we were going to maybe have conversations, but
Yeah.
just not where it went. Not where it went at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The polarization, I mean, my experience of it was that I think maybe geographically this is why, but I mean I was in New York City at the time before I moved to Atlanta. I lived in New York City for 12 years, and I felt the cancel culture pretty quickly, and the
Mm-hmm.
polarization cement after Trump was elected. And because I experienced it myself, being called a transphobe simply for saying, I think Caitlyn Jenner is a trans woman, not a woman, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actively participated in the protest during the pandemic, and I felt like there was a moment too. And yeah, and then I feel like post pandemic, everyone's just dug their feet in even more,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I think Trump really accelerated what was already going on, and then the
Yeah.
pandemic made it even
Oh
worse.
yes.
I think a lot of that is related to TikTok, to be honest, and social media.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Technology, the social media has definitely blown it all up to levels that it would not have been had we not
yeah,
had this
I
at our
can't, I
fingertips.
haven't decided if I think social media is overall worse for society or better, because there are uses for it that have helped,
Mm-hmm.
social change, but I'm still leaning towards it's got had a more negative impact on humans in general, because it's, you know, these it further polarizes language because it's these little sound bites, and then
Yeah.
people are just a lot meaner with a screen in between them than they are,
Yeah.
like, you would never speak to people in real life how
Mhm.
people speak to each other on the internet.
Yes.
I mean, it
Exactly.
disconnects you from that emotional response where you learn what bullying is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kids aren't seeing the impact of their bullying. They don't see
Mm-hmm.
the crying or like the emotional change in a person that they're hurting. So they don't
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of learning lesson that you have when it's, just kids growing up bullying in school or whatever.
Yeah.
And you said you got into, you've always been spiritual though, right?
Yeah, I feel like I mean, I was raised not necessarily like atheist. Like my mom let us be exposed to whatever, anything and everything that was out there if we wanted to. Like I went to Sunday school things with my friend and we did the games and all that. Um, but I was never into any kind of like religion. Like it just was always about connecting with nature. Like we used to go camping a lot, you know, and just that's where I felt my best, you know, like being out where I could connect with all the things.
What you're talking about reminds me of Alice Walker's The Color Purple. The end, like when she says, I never found God in a church. I only found people looking for him to show up, but
Hmm.
like she found God in nature, you know. God is
Yes.
like, and then God is like, you know, and then I love one of my favorite quotes is, I think it pisses God off when you walk by the color purple and don't notice it. Um, it just reminded me
Okay.
of, you know, finding God in nature or spirituality in nature versus
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it never made any sense to me, the stories, you know, because I one of our really good friends was actually very religious. And one of the things that I remember from our childhood is her asking her father something. She was questioning something about the Bible, Jesus, God. I don't remember exactly. And he basically straight up said, "We don't question that. Like, we don't question
really.
that." And yeah, and I mean, I couldn't have been more than, I left Virginia when I was in like fourth grade, so it was younger than that. So I couldn't have been maybe 7, 8, you know, 9 at the most. But yeah, that always stuck with me because we question everything in my household. Like my mother's very, you know, very much into books. We had books of all kinds. Pretty much anything you wanted to find out, you could find on a bookshelf in our house. And so that's something that really turned me off to it, as well as, you know, other experiences. But yeah, I just never felt any need for that kind of
I
spirituality, if you will. I guess.
I was raised Catholic, and I rejected it, I think, finally more like in high school and college. But I find that interesting because I was always inquisitive about it and I always questioned it and I really wanted to be fully faithful. And um one of the priests I sought counsel from told me that a faith not questioned, a faith not questioned is not a faith at all. And actually had the
Mm-hmm.
opposite reaction to your friend's father. Whereas it
Mm-hmm.
like questioning the faith helps solidify it. Now I don't practice any kind of organized religion, but I do tend to, I consider myself sort of a Christian witch. So I do believe in the Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just find that interesting because it just depends on how you grow up in any kind of
Mm-hmm.
Christian or Catholic faith. Some is very dogmatic. You know, I did speak to another priest that once told me it's not a buffet religion, which is when I ended up leaving Catholicism. It's basically like this isn't a religion where you pick and choose what you believe in and what you like or don't like. You take
Mm-hmm.
it all or you leave it. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well then I guess I'm leaving it. Do you do any sort of practicing of your spirituality? Like, do you do rituals? Do you?
Um, well, I'm pretty minimalistic in a lot of things. I try to keep stuff simple. I do have 4 kids, so it's hard to keep any kind of regular like practice. However, I do try to, like I said, get out into nature, um, which I have not been doing enough of recently. I've been very into this activism, you know, this feminist
I
activism that I'm
feel you.
doing.
I'm there with you.
And so I do need to, because I've been feeling very disconnected. So I do need to get back to it. I have started meeting with a couple women. We try to do some full moon rituals. We actually got together last night and, you know, we're reading some of the different symbolisms and elements and things related to the full moon and our zodiac signs and things like that. And you know, we went out under the micro full moon is what it was last night. And we did some card pulling. Like one of the women does tarot readings and another one's kind of kind of, you know, practicing a little bit, but she's not as deeply involved as the other woman. And then I have like my own set of oracle cards, and we all just pulled some cards, and you know, we just have fun with it. Just kind of interpret them however we want. And it's
Yeah.
interesting sometimes the things that come up, the same things that come up in each card pull. Like we had ravens, like we both had ravens, transformation, um, something about karma. So it's really it really feeds the soul to be able to not only do those things but do them with women, you know, gather with women and be able to go out in nature, ground yourself, put your feet in the dirt, look up at the moon. um, and we're very far apart. We did this over Zoom, so it wasn't like in person or anything, because
I love that you did that though. That's beautiful.
yeah,
I
so
love,
I try to do things like that just to
yeah.
stay connected, you know, because we do a lot of this, a lot of this these days. So
Yeah.
we try to,
Well,
you
especially
know,
because
sit
it's
under the
hard.
same moon, and it feels like you're together almost.
Yeah. It's difficult because us turfs, you
Yeah.
know, it's we really are spread out throughout the US, especially American turfs, because we have a very large country.
Yes.
And so we have to stay connected digitally because there's not necessarily ones we can find locally in this
Mm-hmm.
movement. Yeah, but we're getting there. I think I have full faith that soon there will be turfs,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
growing.
all over the US, turf little gatherings. Now you said
Yes.
you became more connected to your spirituality with through your journey into motherhood. Was that like pretty immediate when you became pregnant or the first time?
Um, well, let's see. Okay, so I have four kids. So this might be a bit of a long story. Maybe I'll say it really quick because I get excited and speak fast. But so like I said, I was always kind of a spiritual person. So when I got pregnant with my first daughter, um, I knew that I wanted certain things. So I knew that I wanted to have a natural birth. Like I wanted to do all the things I could to mitigate any kind of pain. I wanted to learn how to do that mentally as opposed to drug induced. So I did a lot of research into that. And ideally, I would have had a midwife, but where I was, there wasn't any access. I was out in the country, and there was just nobody to be found. The only birth center nearby was not taking new patients, Medicaid patients, something like that. So they wouldn't see me. So the next best thing I could find was a all women practice. And their thing was, we're women, so we know what it's like. They did not, because these women are trained in the patriarchy. Okay, they're
Okay.
trained in the medical institutions, which are patriarchal and have destroyed womanly wisdom, the womanly ways. Okay, so I went there pretty naive. I didn't have a lot of experience in the medical institutions. It's not something we really interacted with when I was growing up. My mom wasn't the type to, you know, rush us to the doctor every time we had like a fever or anything like that. We were very much not part of that. So I didn't quite understand just how bad it was. So I thought I would be able to go in there and practice my spirituality and be in touch with my body and my baby and birth the way I wanted to, just, you know, having to be in this space because I was new to all this. You know, I had heard one story about a woman who we had met through La Leche League who tried to have an unassisted birth at her home and was reported she got scared last minute, went to the hospital, they did a C-section, and then tried to report her to CPS or whatever, child services. Which I don't know what came of that, but that was the story that I kind of grew up with. But I also knew that it was, you know, something that women evolved to do, that this was, our bodies were made for this. And so I didn't have that mindset of, oh, I'm going to need an epidural, I'm going to need, you know, I'm going to need this or that medical intervention and they're going to save me. I didn't have that mindset going into it. But what I didn't know is they don't like you when you don't have that mindset going into it, going into a hospital. So I learned a lot with my first on that journey. I
So they
made my
don't like
whole,
they don't like you denying an epidural. They don't like you denying the medications.
most people don't know this, but the OBGYNs do not even see natural birth in their practices. They do not see natural births before they go into practice. Like in medical school, they're not seeing it. These are surgeons. They're trained to do surgery. They're trained to practice interventions. So they don't trust birth. They don't have any kind of reverence for birth. These are not, like I said, they do not have the women wisdom. They have the patriarchal, you're a machine, we're going to control it, it's going to be efficient, you're going to do this at this time, we're going to do this at this time, and then this is going to happen, and then we're going to cut you, or that's their mindset.
I have heard
So
horror
they,
stories that they like will rush women if the birth is taking too
oh
long,
yeah,
they'll do cesarean just because of that, because they want to make their golf appointment or whatever.
yep. And every other woman had an emergency C-section, but it's not really an emergency if they can talk to you about it and prep you for it, and then you go in there and it's like blah blah. But yeah, but it's all, this is part of that spiritual warfare that you were talking about. This is where it started for women. They've wanted to take this from us, and they've been working at it for centuries. Okay, and so going in there, I was fooled by the all women thing, even though they were all female doctors. A couple of them, I think there were like four of them. So a few of them seemed all right, maybe a little more hippie-ish. I happened to get the one that was very much a surgeon, very much liked to cut and sew. And I knew it from the first day I met her. My partner and I actually joked, oh my gosh, she's going to try to cut me open. Like the first day we met her, like we just knew it. I made up a birth plan, which they also do not like. They laugh at it. They laugh at us for making those. The nurses, the doctors, it's disgusting. They
That's
shouldn't
just
even be around women, in my opinion. So I made one, and this doctor, she kind of joked like, oh yeah, well, some of these women, they just want to go out into the bean field and labor all day. And in my head, I was just like, yeah, that sounds great. Like I'll go out into the labor all day and have my baby without you poking and prodding and trying to slice me open. Sure. So I just knew it wasn't going to be good, and it just so happened that I got her because it was like whatever doctor was on call that day, that's who you got. So when I went into labor, um she's who was there. And just from the get-go, it was, I mean, she had a major God complex. Like the nurse checked me and said I was whatever 6 centimeters dilated. Then she came in and checked, and this is way too much. They shouldn't even be, I mean, yeah. So she came in, everything the nurse would say, she would contradict it. I started to get stressed out. I wanted to be moving around. They totally ignored my birth plan. She had read it. The nurses hadn't. My partner had forgot it, so that the nurses didn't get it. But so I was in there in the bed, needing to move around. They hooked me up to the monitor, and my belly, my abdomen started to swell. And so then the doctor comes in and she's like, oh, well, we might want to start talking about a C-section. Like this was like just not even, hadn't even been there an hour, and things were progressing fine. Like, I mean, I was progressing fine. Everything was perfectly fine. I knew it in my body. I knew it in my mind that everything was fine. I was just stressed out because of this crazy nonsense they put me through immediately upon entering this hospital. So luckily my partner, I'd talked to him about what I wanted. And so she went out for a minute and we were able to talk. And I was like, yeah, I want to get in the shower and try to relax a little bit. Like, I think this is just stress. Like, I don't think anything's wrong. So we told her, we're going to take our time. I'm going to get in the shower, try to calm down. And then, so I went and did that. And I don't know how long, because, you kind of lose track of time when you're in labor. And I was fine. I was laboring in the shower. A nurse came in and asked me why I didn't want an epidural, which is not necessarily like, why are you asking me that? If I don't ask you for it, why would you ask me why I don't want it? Especially in the middle of labor, like
yeah.
serious, like active labor. Like, are you kidding me? So I was in the shower. And eventually they said that it was flooding the floor below me, because it was like one of those rolling, like it didn't have any walls. It was, to roll like um, a wheelchair in, kind of.
Okay.
So it didn't have anything blocking. It was just flat floor, the whole bathroom. So they said I was flooding the floor below. So then in labor, they want me to move rooms. So they changed me to another room, and this room has a bathtub. And they get me in the bathtub, and I'm feeling okay. I'm laboring. I'm on my hands and knees. They say my baby's sunny side up, so turn, with the face facing my front,
Okay.
which you want the back of the head there. Okay. So I'm in the tub, and the nurse comes in, and she can't check me. She doesn't know how to check me on my hands and knees. Like, this is how little they're educated
And
in what women need.
question,
You should be able to check a woman in any position. Okay. Go on.
and I've read that the position they have women in to give birth at hospitals is not the ideal natural position that is the best for childbirth. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, it is not at all. It's a position that makes it easier for them to see. It is a position that makes it easier for them when you have an epidural, because then there's an epidural called a walking epidural, which they don't do. They might do more now, I don't know, but it used to be more done in like European countries and not so much here. So you get like the full epidural. You can't feel your legs, so you can't move. So it's a position where they can have, you with the epidural, and they can see everything, and they can, do whatever they want to do down there. So
That's
so they're
very
not used to this. They're not used to women moving around the way that they want to. They're not used to a woman saying, no, I don't want this. I mean, before I even went into this, women were doubting me. They were saying, oh, you're going to beg for that epidural. No, you don't know me. I know me, and I'm not going to beg for it. I don't want it. I can do this. Millions of women before me did it. I can do it. So, yeah, so then they were able to get me out of the shower. So they were able to get me in the bed and take their control, because she couldn't check me in the shower. So from there, everything went downhill. Horrible experience, purple pushing, like they're telling you to push when you don't really need to. And so it wears you out.
Yeah.
Um, it ended with my baby having the vacuum, the suction. So it's a suction cup that they put on the baby's head, and they suction it out. They're only supposed to do it a couple times. This doctor, even with all the nurses in the room telling her she's not supposed to do it another time, did it again, saying she didn't get a good pull the last time. They said, no, the book says you're not supposed to do it again. She did it again. She lacerated my baby's head. It's common for them to have a hematoma, but she also had a hematoma, but it was also cut. It had a laceration. So she gets my baby out. I think I don't even remember. I push. I don't. The
What is
baby comes out.
wrong?
She panics. She can't find something on her tray. She wants to cut the cord immediately. So once she finally finds her her scissors to cut the cord, she cuts it. They take my baby. I don't take a breath until I hear my baby cry. It takes a little while. So it felt like forever. But I see her pale on the bed, a couple feet away from me, with people working on her. And I'm just whispering to myself, is she okay? Is she okay? And nobody's answering me, of course. And then I hear her cry, and I finally breathe a breath of relief. And it's so bizarre, because while I'm in complete shock and panic and worried about my baby, I'm also euphoric because I didn't have any drugs. So all my oxytocin, all the all the endorphins that are there, that are supposed to be built up, and the adrenaline for when you meet your baby and you bring them to your chest and you feel that love, is there, but I don't have my baby. So it was the most surreal experience. This doctor she knew she had messed up, because you could tell she was panicking. She was like, oh, she needed to clamp the cord, like there was blood squirted across the freaking room. It was ridiculous. It was a complete like mess. Total, like trauma. We spent like a week in the hospital, and they bounced me around from room to room, because I was technically released or whatever, but my baby wasn't, and I refused to leave, and they knew they messed up. So they didn't even ask me. They didn't even ask me to leave. I was like, if they try to make me leave, I'm going to go sit in their waiting room. I'm not leaving my baby in this hospital. So, but they knew they had messed up. So I got rooms each night until I was able to leave with my baby. And I promised my baby, when we left, I promised her we would never step foot into a fucking hospital again. Never again. So many women leave this experience thinking the hospital saved them. Okay. Thinking that this is normal. This is our normal, but it's not okay. Because I've heard so many stories where women, when you hear their story, you feel their trauma, but they don't even realize it. They don't realize it's trauma. They don't realize that it wasn't okay what happened to them, because it's been so normalized in our culture that we have mothers and babies leaving this experience that should be the ultimate spiritual, transcending experience of your life, just completely traumatized. And that's exactly how they want it. And that is why it is spiritual warfare. Because if women were leaving feeling the power that you feel when you birth your babies in your power, in your way, women would know that they are capable of absolutely anything. Okay? You wouldn't have women bowing down to men and doing all this dick pandering and all that crap. Okay? My partner has to deal with me, and he's done beautifully. And he's seen his, because my first partner, he is different than my last three babies. So my first partner, he witnessed that trauma. He's not a good person. He's a narcissist. It's why I know how to deal with these narcissists and avoid their bull crap and not feed into their egos and their, and all of that. So my second partner, who I've had my last three babies with, he's witnessed this power as well. He says it's not as spiritual an experience for him, but I know that he at least doesn't have the trauma of what other men are also experiencing when they see their partners go through this trauma. Okay. So after that experience, I read like crazy. I consumed everything. I went into women's groups. I talked to midwives. I talked to doctors. I watched YouTubes. I listened to podcasts. I read midwifery texts. I read medical texts. I read everything for the next 6 years. I could have a doctorate, whatever, like I could do all the things. So I read everything, and I found my truth. I found that I have the power to do this. I found that I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody. It's me and my baby and the universe, and we can do this. So my next three were at home, free births, no midwife, no doula, which, it would be nice to have women.
You're a warrior. I would be afraid to do it completely alone.
And so many women would, but that's the narrative, that's what we're told in our society, is that it's scary and you're going to die and this and that. But the truth is, there wouldn't be so many of us if they're killing us in hospitals. That's the truth. They're killing us in hospitals. Because this is something that we have evolved quite well to do. Yes, death happens, but death is also a part of life. And that's another thing about it, is that you have to come to terms with that if you are going to do it this way. Like, you have to say, what am I willing to accept? Am I willing to accept that I might die? Am I willing to accept that my baby might die? How much am I willing to accept to do this? Okay? To do this in a way that I know is best for me and my baby. So I was able to, some people feel like they don't need all this education. And you don't. Your body's going to do it. We birth babies every day. Women have babies in their cars, on the sidewalk, walking. Like my daughter's teacher, she had a story where she was walking into the hospital, had the baby on the sidewalk, walking into the hospital. Like, you really don't need anybody or anything outside of yourself to have a baby. But we've been sold this lie that if we're not in a hospital with all the beeping and the surgery and the medication, we're all going to die. But it's just not the truth. So, having educated myself, I knew what was best for me. I'm not saying it's for everybody. It would be wonderful if I could have had women holding space for me. But there was not any woman in my life not a friend, not a relative, not anybody in my life that I knew that I could have trusted to be in that space, hold space for me, and leave their hang-ups at the door. There was nobody. So I knew I had to do it this way, and it was completely fine with me to do it this way because I don't want to be touched. I don't want to be talked to. I just want to feel the universe and that connection and do a dance with my baby and work ourselves out. That's what I want. That's what works for me. So my second daughter, that's exactly what I did. We did our dance. It was like 1 a.m, the day after Mother's Day.
Oh.
And I just got up. Yeah, it was so nice. My sister's best friend, she had touched my belly that day, and she was like, "Oh, the baby's gonna be born tonight." And she's a little witchy. She doesn't admit it, but she is. She's like, "The baby's gonna be born tonight, and it's gonna be a girl." Because I also don't have any scans or anything, so there's no like sure thing. You know, it's my intuition. It's what I feel, and I mean, mothers are usually right about the sex of their babies.
But you
Like
didn't
1
have
in the
any
morning.
babies? Just kidding.
Don't have any babies.
I said you
No,
didn't
no.
have any
And
babies.
nobody observed, nobody assigned them. So they're still unassigned. So I'm not sure what they are. But that's so crazy. It blows my mind.
Yeah,
Um,
we were.
it's a crazy world. Like I still have faith that maybe, you know, logic and reason will prevail. But you know, it's gonna be hard to get there at this point. We've gone pretty far down some crazy spiral. But yeah, so I was able to, you know that I could do this. And I also needed to do it to heal from my first birth, to heal that trauma. I had done a lot of healing and talking. I told my story many times. I cried and cried and cried, and I told that story until I no longer cried telling it. If this had been a few years ago, you know, 10 whatever years ago, I would have broken down and not been able to get fully through the story with you. Okay. But so then I went on to have my second daughter, and I did our dance in the evening, or well, I guess it was 1 a.m, in the dark, lit some candles, walked around my house, bounced on my yoga ball, and I wasn't even gonna wake my partner, but I had a pool that I wanted to get into, and he had unhooked the hose. I thought it was hooked up, and so I went to try to hook it with my big old belly, having contractions, and I couldn't get it to hook. It was behind the washer, so I had to go wake him up. Otherwise, I would have just had this baby. Like I would have just gotten in my tub and had the baby, and he would have woke up to me like holding a baby.
Oh, that's so cute.
Incredibly powerful and healing. But at the same time, so simple. You know, like I got in my pool, it got super intense. My waters broke. And there was a brief moment where I felt myself tense up, and I said no. You know, I said no because I knew the only way out was through. I love that saying, the only way out is through. And I said no, and I just let go, and you know, released any sense of control or anything like that. And my baby, she flew out into the water, arms wide open, lips pierced in red, beautiful little girl. Her daddy reached in and lifted her up out of the water and into my arms. And I mean, it was the most powerful healing moment of my entire life, just in that instant. And yeah, and I knew that this was the way, and that I had to share this with other women and support other women to also have this experience. Because like I said, not every woman wants to do it alone. And I would love to be that woman to hold space for other women. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I wish I was right now. I wish I was working, holding space for other women as they brought the next generations into the world. But now I have to fight for our language, for just to maintain our language so that we can continue to even have that option. You know? So long story short, kind of, I went on to have 2 more babies after that. each one had its own lessons. My second one, I hummed and I sang and I swayed and danced a lot. And in that one, I think is where I felt the deepest connection to all the women before and after that, that time and space, like just expansive, expansive feeling like we are connected to everything and we are always here. We've been here since the beginning of time and we'll be here till the end of time, whatever whatever that is. Like it was incredibly expansive. And and with my last one, like I realized this is power. This is pure power flowing through us. We are, we're taking all of this energy from the universe and creating life. And only women can do that. No wonder men are so jealous of it. No wonder the patriarchy wants to kill that. Because with that, we are unstoppable. And I don't think you have to have children to know that. You just have to be a woman. You just have to be a woman. And in another time, we would have witnessed that. It would have been women with women. You would have witnessed, your siblings being born or your cousins. You would have been there. We would have all witnessed it. And we would have all been together as women. And the men wouldn't have been part of this. So this is ours. This is our spirituality. This is our transcendence. They need drugs to do it. We don't, we can do it just naturally in our own bodies. And when you're there in that space with a woman in her power like that, you are transcending too. And so, yeah, more men should even witness it. They should, but they instead of witnessing it and feeling the power and respecting it, they got jealous of it and said, oh, well, we need this God that created life, who's not a woman, even though their Jesus still needed a womb and a woman to come to earth through. Like, you can't deny it. So like you said, it's spiritual warfare, and it's been going on for a very long time. You destroy the mother, you destroy humanity. They think that's going to make them, but it's going to kill them too. It's going to kill all of us.
Yeah, it's really escalating, and the scariest element of it to me is that the women fighting this are being demonized the most. The women, the fiercest protectors of children, are in some countries facing prison for refusing to comply. It's terrifying. And I don't think I was aware of the spiritual warfare of it. I mean, really, I'm coming way late to the game because I was very much a lib fem, very much an atheist, very much, brainwashed by the patriarchy and thinking, some, overly sexualized roles I took were somehow empowering to me and all that bullshit. And it was, it was the wool being pulled from my eyes on gender ideology that has just wrecked my entire worldview in the best way. But it's really scary what's happening. But I've learned so much from you listening to you. I never would have considered that it has been going on since, patriarchal structures within the medical field trying to rob women of their powers, even in that, and taking control.
It's
I didn't realize that epidurals caused you to not feel your legs.
Yes, and they can also go up and cause you to not be able to breathe. That happened to my sister-in-law.
But that takes you out of your power. That itself, like, you can't feel the lower part, the entire, like, that's, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever have kids, but if I do, I'm definitely going your route. That's very unsettling. I mean, I find it like that almost reminds me of how some people do hypnotherapy, and I don't know how that's beneficial necessarily to them. Like, if you're disconnecting someone from themselves.
No, I have my thoughts on that as well. I feel like the hypno movement came into being to silence women. Women make noise. Women get loud. Some don't, some do. But that hypnotherapies, the like hypno babies, or I forget there's a couple different ones, but it's to like silence you. You don't need to be silenced. You need to let that, like I said, you need to let that power roar through you if that's how it needs to come. And what that does is it's hypnotizing you. It's, to me, it's almost like a meditation. It's also expecting something outside of yourself though, because you're listening to these, like you feel like you have to have these recordings. There's these pre-recordings that you're supposed to listen to and have earphones in and stuff like that, which that would bother me. I can't have any kind of noises other than, you know, my family running around. I tried to even have music. It never worked for me. So yeah, I think that's also another way of disconnecting us. But it all starts by going in and depending on technologies to allow you to see your baby. A lot of women don't feel connected to their babies until they've seen the ultrasound, which is another way of disconnecting us from our bodies and our babies, when you could just sit at home and, like you said earlier, connect to your womb space. You can meditate on it. You can sense that life growing inside of you. And like I said, a majority of the time when I ask a mother what sex she thinks her baby is, she's right. You know, when you've taken the time to connect without any technology, it's your power, your body, it's part of your body, your baby's part of your body, and then even after our babies are born, there's another disconnect. So you depend on the ultrasound and the tests and the scans, and then the medication and the doctors to save you. And then after your baby's born, we're disconnected. They want to take your baby to a nursery. They want to tell you not to sleep with your babies. My whole family before me slept with their babies and we all survived. When I was in the hospital, a nurse came in and said, "Oh, don't lay with your baby. That's not safe. That thing that was playing on the TV, don't sleep with your babies." Like everything was telling you to disconnect from your babies. They take them away. They want to give them formula. They'll give them formula without your permission. I said, "Bring me my baby when she wakes up." They gave her formula. They had her under the lights for jaundice. I said, when she's done with this, bring her to me. I see my baby sitting in there, not under the lights and not with me. And I got irate. I was like, "What are you doing? You said my baby had to be in here because she had to be under those lights. And she's not with me. What's wrong with you people?" They treat them like they're theirs. This is not your baby. This is my baby. And I could leave at any moment. The only reason I didn't leave that hospital is because they had injured her. So then they take your babies away. They tell you not to sleep with them, put them in another room, sleep train them. They're just trying to manipulate you. But the reality is our babies are very underdeveloped when they're born. Very underdeveloped. Their brains, their jaws, their immune system, all underdeveloped. We are still meant to be part of each other for years, not weeks, not months, years. That's another thing. Women don't know that it is natural and normal for babies to nurse for years. We've been convinced that weeks are okay. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but anthropologically, naturally, we are meant to nurse from an average of 3 to 7 years being normal. An
Wow.
average of 3 years with 7 being completely normal for human children.
I did not have
My
any
first
idea.
baby, she nursed till she was 5, which is the longest of any of my babies. But she also had, we both had trauma, and she had a head
Yeah.
injury, and she's developed beautifully. She's very intelligent, creative, thank goodness. But I'm not gonna lie, I always worry. I
Yeah,
always
I was
worry.
actually going to ask you that question if you noticed a difference in their development based off of, her traumatic
Um,
birth experiences versus your other
she
three.
was always a lot more cautious than any of my other kids. And I've always been a lot more protective of her than any of my other kids. And I know that has a lot to do with the trauma. And I know that I haven't been diagnosed with anything. Like I've never been to a therapist or anything like that. I did my own art therapy, talk therapy. But there are things that trigger it, to where I still have like panic attacks or whatever. It's gotten less and less. It actually got worse during the pandemic, just panic attacks in general. Um, but so I know it's still there, and I see myself and feel myself being different with her. as opposed to my last three. So yeah, that trauma, it stays with you.
My sister is similar. She had I don't remember if there's a term, but she was born and the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, so she wasn't breathing. And she's and my mother's always been more protective of her, and she's always been the shyest, most cautious, most, and I bet that has a lot to do with it, just coming into
Mm-hmm.
the world in such a traumatic way.
And the trauma is not the cord around the neck. That happens. The cord actually wraps around babies, and there's physiologically there's Wharton's jelly. So that's
Okay.
made to protect the cord from strangling, from
Oh,
tangling, from knotting. Like if you ever see a knot, it'll slide up and down the cord because that's a protective mechanism. So it's
okay.
not the trauma, it's not the cord around the neck. The trauma is the doctors telling you that that's harmful and that it could kill your baby, when in reality it's their panic that's harmful. It's them cutting the cord that's harmful.
Oh,
Cutting babies cords, they should be staying connected to the placenta for quite some time after birth, which is another thing people don't realize.
how
We are
long?
causing more trauma. The placenta can be resuscitating. Like I have heard stories of babies completely not being there, and then the placenta being placed in like a warm water bowl or something like that, and the baby, and they would work on the baby, and the mom would rub the baby, and the mom would talk to the baby, and the baby would come, it would come into its body. And I've heard these stories many times from midwives and mothers, and they say the baby, she wasn't there yet, but then I talked to her and I saw her come into her body. So we're causing so much trauma, and women don't even have an inkling of a clue of what is actually happening to them and their babies. We're told, oh, it was this, it was your body didn't work right, this didn't work right, that didn't work right, but we work so fucking well. We have evolved beautifully, like so beautifully. And we talk about spirituality, but this is science. This is scientific facts that are ignored, that are completely ignored. And this was part of my awakening too, was just knowing how much of science is a fucking lie. It's a lie. It is a way to control us, to take us out of our bodies, and the things that evolution has done so well, which should be part of our education and our science, you'd think, right? But is completely ignored so that they can make money. So they can say, you need this new drug, you need this new shot, you need this and that and the other, and you got to pay for it because it's science and we know what we're doing and it's great and we can make you better and faster and, bionic women. But no, you know what I mean? Like it was such a huge awakening for me, just the journey of
How
having my
long
children.
would should a baby stay connected to the umbilical cord? How long do they say?
That's really up to the mother. I've had a few for a few hours, which isn't
Okay.
harmful. But you should at least, at the very least, wait until the cord is white.
Okay.
So they will cut it immediately after birth, and then they have the delayed cord cutting, which is total bull crap. It's like minutes, but it should be at least, I mean, in my opinion, a couple hours.
Okay. Is that what you
Um,
did? Or you waited till
with
it went
my
white?
yes, with my other ones, I would have my baby in my birthing pool, and then I'd feel like moving. So I'd go to my tub, my bathtub, birth the placenta. This is another thing. A lot of women don't even know that there's all these parts to birth. You birth the baby and then there's more. And then you have to birth the placenta. So I would birth my babies and then go and birth my placenta in my bathtub. And I would put it in a bowl and we'd come to the bed and I'd be brought like some scrambled eggs, something nice and nutritious. I'd have the bowl next to us, my plate of food, and my baby in my arms on my chest, nursing, getting used to nursing, because like I said, sometimes they need a little help. Sometimes, it takes a little learning curve, for mom and baby to get comfortable with each other and get latched. And sometimes they just want to sleep after birth. It's a long, tedious journey,
Yeah.
so I don't worry about it. So we just sit there as long as, whatever. Some people do what they call a lotus birth, which is where you just wait with the placenta until it detaches itself, so you don't cut it at all. That they usually have to put herbs and things on top of it, dry it out, put it in a container, and that's just too much for me, especially now that I have multiple children. And I just never felt called to do that. Like I always felt leaving it at least a few hours is good enough. And then some women will burn the cord, which is kind of more ceremonial and feels
Mhm.
good for people. I've never really felt the need to do that. But, you know, whatever feels good to you and your family, and make it special, you know, make it ceremonial, make it ritualistic. Like we've lost these things. You
Yeah.
know, they've become a tool of the patriarchy and only in religion. But we can come back to them. We need these things in our lives, you know? We need these practices because it does bring you back to the universe and connect it, and, you know, the connections to all things. And it's just, it's comforting, you know, it's warm, it's love, it's family. Everybody gets to participate, you know? Like I have this video of my last birth where they're all watching the placenta be born. And so I had, you know, 3 kids at this point, and this was the 4th. And I wanted to catch the whole thing, but I kind of missed some of it. But you hear the babies there. Oh wow, what's that? Oh, it looks like what did I forget what they said, but like it looks like meat or something. It looks like a sack of meat. So I'm like holding it and I'm explaining this is the placenta, and it kept, you know, it was the baby's home, kept the baby alive, and you know, this is the anatomy of it. This is the sac that the
That's so
baby was in.
special that they get to be
Yeah.
there for that.
Yeah,
That's
and then you have a
beautiful.
connection to your mother and to
Yeah.
birth and to how you could have it when, you know, I have 3 girls and a boy. So they
Oh my
want to be
God, that's
mothered.
my mom. That's my family. What
Oh,
ages? Who, I'm just, now is
I
it,
have I have 12, a 12-year-old, and then there were 6 years between. So I have 12, 6, 5, and 3. So it was like
who's
six
the
years and then
youngest?
bam, bam, bam.
Who's the youngest?
Um, I have a baby girl, so the boy's in the
Okay.
middle. He's the
Okay. I was just
third.
curious because ours is a 3 older sisters, 1 young brother, the baby boy. So I was just
Yeah.
curious if it ended up being.
He acts like the youngest though.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of how our dynamic was too. Well, I was, I also acted like the youngest because I was the youngest girl. So it's kind of like, we sort of shared that role in a way. My other sister
Huh.
very much has much more of the middle sibling sort of tendencies than I do because I was treated like a
Yeah.
baby too. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I love that you had 3 girls and a boy because that's
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. My oldest was almost like an only child, so she got pretty babied, but still complains that she didn't get enough babying. Like she's like, "Where's my time?" I was like, "Girl, you got 6 years all to yourself." And she's still like, it's great. I don't want her to grow up. She's growing up too fast. Like she's gonna be 13 in a few months, and
It's got to be so scary, especially to be a mom of girls right now.
oh, yes. And that's another thing I wanted to mention too is like mothers, parents, like we have to talk to our kids. Like I fully believe that that is how we protect them from this insanity. Because my daughter, her dad got her a computer. She wanted to, you know, she wanted to be YouTube famous, okay? Because, you know, there's YouTube and they see it and they think it's really cool and everybody's doing it. And I said, no, if you're going to do anything on YouTube, you have to be thoughtful about it. You have to be original about it. You have to be creative with it. You're not just going to sit there and open boxes or whatever it is they do on YouTube. We're all very creative. This is a family of artists. I'm an artist. My partner's an artist. Um, so she started to get into drawing as well. We got her a tablet, drawing tablet for the computer. And then she wanted to connect with people online because that's our age, right? And
Mhm.
I didn't want her to have the technology yet, but she did because her father got it for her against my wishes. So I figured the best I can do is educate her on how to use these things, how to use these tools safely. So she wanted to get online and start sharing her art. And I was like, that's great. So let's talk about how you can do that. And maybe even think about selling art and how you would do that. How would you market art? What would you sell it for? You know? And she got into is it deviant art? Some of those spaces. And then she found the furries. She found the furries.
Oh no. Oh no.
So when I saw her finding these things, I said, listen, this is a
Mhm.
very dangerous space that you have found. There are
Yeah.
very dangerous men. There are predators that will want to take you into places you don't need to be. She didn't like it. She didn't like that these gentle, fluffy, cute characters that the kids were all drawing, because there's a lot of kids in that community, okay? A lot of kids. And I am so grateful that I knew what I knew. The first time I had ever heard of furries was years ago. Years ago. I used to watch all the weird, like, real sex and uh I think Vice had a few documentaries about different like sexual things. So I used to watch these things. I found them fascinating. But luckily I did, because watching that, that's where I first saw furries as a kink. Okay. So I knew it was a kink. That was my first exposure to it. So when she came across this stuff, I said, oh no, this is not good. This is not healthy. You cannot be part of this. But I also know that if you completely restrict children, they're going to rebel, right? I saw it growing up. I saw the kids that were like really, really repressed and restricted from all things, and they went crazy as soon as they could. They really lashed out and like did all kinds of like drugs and pregnant and whatever, like just went all out. So I'm not of that mindset with my kids. I talk to them honestly, factually. With all the birth stuff, they know the body. Okay, so they know what's real there. They know who births babies. They know who creates life. They know these things. So I was honest with her. This is not a safe place. These are not good people. And she's like, oh, but the furries, and they're nice, and they're kids, and they're just artists. I was like, okay, but look, you have to watch out for this, this, and this. Watch out for these men. Don't talk to anybody you don't know as a child. If let me see. So I keep an eye on her stuff. I say, let me see your interactions. Let me see who you're talking to. And then, she's kind of moved away from it now, which is
Okay.
nice. She's still doing art. She's still doing like fandom art. What is it? Warriors. So it's like this cat series. And she's fully aware of all these things that are happening. I've talked to her about the trans, all the gender stuff that's going on. And I don't know if
She's
well, you were there,
powerful.
you came.
I met her. I saw her speak.
Yeah, you did. You met her. So she's been coming to
Yeah.
these events with me
So
and speaking
beautiful.
very powerfully. She's a wonderful speaker. She's very outgoing. And I've been so proud. And I feel like that is what saved her, because she could have very easily, she's very sweet girl, very, very sweet, could have easily been drawn in by some weirdo, and convinced to do, I don't even want to imagine what. But I talked to her. I told her the facts. I told her what dangers were lurking in the shadows of what she finds, fun and joyous, which it makes sense. These are kids, lots of kids enjoy furry, fluffy, cute, bright, colorful things. Her dad decides he's going to take her to the conventions. So I tell him, look, if you take her to these conventions, you better keep an eye on her, because this is not all sweet and innocent. There are perverted people. She showed me pictures. There's a furry with a harness, like a dog harness, but it's one of the sex harnesses, one of the, like, whatever you call it, S&M kind of harnesses. And I'm like,
I
oh,
don't
so that
understand why
one.
it's so hard for people to grasp that an adult into child things is a perversion.
Yeah,
Like
no,
it's
no, it is.
it's
They even have, supposedly they have kid ones and adult ones. Okay. So I think
mhm.
the first one she went to was a little more kid friendly, even though it looked like it was all adults. The second one, I looked up the itinerary. They had 18 only, 18 plus things. One of them was baby furries. We know what baby furries are, don't we? The ones in diapers, these grown men with freaking diapers on and crap. I mean, I'm glad
I
she's
just
moving
can we
it.
bring back kink shaming? Can that be our 2023 one of our resolutions?
Yes,
Like,
please. Like,
God,
I've had it. I've had it. Like, I had a
disgusting.
friend mention, oh, well, that's, isn't kink shaming? That's not very sex positive. And I'm like, look, fuck sex positive. When I first heard of sex positive, it was teaching, it was educating you on your body, what's healthy, what makes sense, what consent is. It's gone too far. Everything is
Yeah.
not sex positive. Everything is not okay. Teaching girls that they need to have anal sex and be choked
Oh,
and bound is not okay. That's
the
not
fact that
healthy. It's
now,
not for their pleasure. It's for some male fantasy because women aren't getting off on that shit. I don't care what you say. You
no.
know, I've talked to women about this. They have trauma and they think they're pleasing some man and that makes them happy, but then they get out of it and they realize it was very harmful for them and that it
Well,
was
they just
all
degraded
for
themselves. Yeah, like oh, women's conditioning to externalize their validation and to base it on our sexual, like our how degrading we can be for men is just liberal feminism is really bad.
yeah.
But I mean, I just learned it about myself, just and I'm 35 now, so it's like my
Yeah.
heart breaks for the girls growing up now. It's even worse. Now, I don't want to talk for all forever because this has been amazing, but I try to keep my episodes at an hour, but I'm probably going to use all of this because you've educated me so much. I really want to ask if you have like one book that you'd recommend the most or like three books, because now with your 6 years of reading, I want to read about all this stuff. So are there
Oh,
like
geez.
books you'd be some of your top recommendations for women like me who don't know about all this stuff and are trying to learn?
Well, one of the, hold on, one of my, oh, I just destroyed my room. Sorry. One of my top recommendations for all women is this one, The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth. You can see the authors here. So
Oh,
definitely get this one. I had it in PDF originally, and it's one you want a hard copy of. So this one goes back
I
to the
read so
beginning of
much better that
time.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and she just goes through, coming out of the primordial ooze and women being able to parthenogenicize, where, originally, this is kind of speculation, but it's a great thought, like that you didn't need to have two sexes. It was just women, and we were able to reproduce independently. And I feel like maybe that's why the male the male Y is kind of disintegrating.
I
We're gonna go
know.
back
I read this
to
great thread about that,
parthenogenesis.
an article, and I wanted to make a thread, but yeah, that's fascinating, and that they think that there might be a way for women to reproduce with bone marrow combined with, and it's just like, oh, men have
Two
been trying to figure
ovums.
out a way for men to give birth forever, and it's like you're obsolete,
So
babe.
yeah, no, they tried it. They've done it in a lab with mice, two
Okay,
ovums, and they're able to live. The males, you can't do it. They die.
of
So it's
course.
it's two ovums. You can do it. And there's been other, sci-fi stories and things written and movies
Oh,
made,
that's so
which are all very
cool.
fascinating. And
And
hey, if it's what has
they
to
only
happen.
birth females, right? They only birth
Yes,
females.
and
So
it would
this,
only be females. Well, there's different
yes.
forms of parthenogenesis.
Okay.
So there's one where it's technically just a clone kind of you, and then there's another way that it happens where it's not exactly an exact copy. So I'd have to do a little more reading into it, but it's really a fascinating, just phenomenon that happens in other species, just not us. But so it's possible. It's scientifically, it's theoretically, it's possible and fascinating. So this is the ultimate book, I think, for women. And then Sheila Kissinger. I don't have one of her books right next to me, and I'm not going to go out into my rest of my house because my kids are out there, and it'll be a storm of children bombarding me. But Sheila Kissinger, she is the one to read about birth. She has just amazing insights. She talks about the history and the power of women and getting back to that, rediscovering birth. I think is
The name
one of
of one of her
the
books.
main ones that I read. But she has lots of books. She has lots of them. And I can send you her name and things later if you want to put it in the description. And then another one that I think is very important for women is let me see if I have it here. Oh, yes. This one, A Woman's Book of Choices. So this is about abortion, menstrual extraction, and the pill, the abortion pill, the
Is RU
RU
486 an
486.
abortion pill? Okay.
So this is an older book. You know, they talk about the Janes and the work that they did, and they talk about menstrual extraction. And this is important because this shows how we can take even the control of reproduction, abortion, menstrual extraction into our own hands. Okay. So if women knew this and we tracked our cycles, which is also another good book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which just teaches you so much about your body, about your cycles, about your cervix, your anatomy, your cervical fluids or mucus, whatever you want to call it, CM, the position of your cervix, you know, things women you just don't hear about, you don't learn about. Lots of women don't even know they have a cervix until they get pregnant, and they're talking about checking your cervix, which they don't have to do because really we like to say it's not a crystal ball. You know, it can't really tell you anything. Like they say, oh, you've got to be dilated this much, that much. None of it's necessary unless the woman wants to stick her own hand in there and like feel if her baby's head is coming. It's just not necessary. The baby's gonna come, you know. And we need, if we were in touch with ourselves, we know when something is wrong. Like I'm a firm believer. People think I'm totally crazy and like anti-medicine and science and whatever, when I'm totally not. I'm absolutely the opposite. Like I believe in science. My beliefs are based also off of facts, off of science. So I believe we can have a balance, but they don't want a balance. They want all the money. It's greed, for greed and control. We could have balance. When a woman feels like something's wrong, if she's connected to her body and she feels like something's wrong and she needs to go get further checks, then you go. But to just make that the default is where we are disconnected, because it's our default at this point. So yeah, I don't want to, I could go, oh God, I could go on and on
I mean,
forever.
I've
So
learned
I'm
so
gonna
much.
stop
This has been
myself.
amazing. Yeah. So this, yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. It's been really
I appreciate you
insightful.
having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff, and I haven't
And
got to enough in the turf world.
I feel like there's a growing number of spiritual feminists, and I like that. I'm almost, to be honest, veering towards female supremacy, but I'll say feminist
Hey,
for now.
hey, this is what you're doing. I love your channel. It's wonderful.
I really appreciate your support.